Sarah, it's so scary.
Hey, Sarah, unlike you, Amber is sensitive. You should be kind to her.
My husband was kind before we got married. But after we got married and my sister-in-law started coming to visit, he changed. My sister-in-law always makes me the bad guy and hides behind my husband. And my husband gets angry when I don't show love toward my sister-in-law. I was beginning to regret my marriage, as my mother-in-law was the same as my husband. I am Sarah, 32 years old. People around me urged me to get married, and I finally made it happen 6 months ago. I usually work for a company and live with my husband, Mason, who is 3 years older than me. I never really dreamed of getting married. In my department, I am the youngest, and most of the women are in their 40s, and they all spend a lot of time complaining about their husbands during breaks. Some are divorced, and some are single mothers who are having a difficult time. To me, marriage felt like a curse that would tie me down for life. So when Mason and I were dating, I didn't even hint that I wanted to get married. And it was just enough for me to go on a date occasionally. Because once you're married, you're going to see what you don't like about the other person, whether you like it or not. After about 3 months of marriage, feeling a bad vibe, and now that it has been 6 months, the thoughts of divorce was on my mind. The reason I started thinking about it was because Mason's sister, Amber, my sister-in-law. Mason and Amber are 7 years apart, and I think she is 28 now. My in-laws and Mason must have loved or spoiled Amber a lot. She's quite the spoiled brat. Mason had bragged about having a cute little sister many times since we were dating. But I just thought he simply loved his sister at that time. And it never occurred to me that he was attached to his sister. But I think I saw a glimpse of it during our wedding greetings. Even though we were to talk about our marriage, my mother-in-law kept talking about Amber. You know, Amber loves her older brother and a very sweet girl. If you have a fight with Mason, you should call Amber. She'll solve it right away. Mason nodded his head in agreement with his mother, and for some reason, he looked very proud. Amber looked a little embarrassed, but when my mother-in-law praised her, she smiled happily. My father-in-law looked ashamed and bewildered, but seemed to just let it happen. I thought to myself that she must have been the youngest and most spoiled child in the family. I thought that when I got married, I would live separately from my in-laws, and that I would inevitably be separated from Amber as well. However, I was wrong. Amber used to come to our house once every 2 weeks when we first got married. But the frequency of her visits has increased to once every 3 days now. She always came when Mason was home and say, "Mason!" and hugs Mason like a child. He would pat her head gently and said,
Oh, Amber, you can't help it, can you? I'm married now, so no more for you.
He says no, but he doesn't mean it. When I look at them with wide eyes, Amber shows tears in her eyes and gives Mason a frightened look. Sarah, it's so scary.
Hey, Sarah, unlike you, Amber is sensitive. You should be kind to her.
Mason has become a different person since we got married. Where is the kind Mason he used to be? Especially when Amber is involved. He becomes nervous, like a mother cat protecting her child. Even though I thought that my marriage was a failure, I had to live with my husband's relationship with his sister because it was not a valid reason for divorce. Amber's outburst became more serious. I manage Mason's and my salary and give him an allowance of $500 a month. I also have an allowance of $500 for myself to keep it equal. But one day, Amber suddenly said, "Mason, I got fired from my job." I don't know how Amber is behaving at work, but it is probably Amber who is at fault. It's obvious from her private life that she hasn't been taking her work seriously, and I feel sorry for the company that hired her.
What? I'm gonna go and complain to them then. Hey, Sarah, we'll have to sue them for unfair dismissal.
But Mason doesn't share my opinion. He wants to bring me into this and drive that poor company even further into the ground. Amber, do you even know why you were fired? Something about how all the guys were nice to me, but all the female seniors were mean to me. And a bunch of them went to their bosses, saying that they will quit because of me. Amber said with tears in her eyes, and Mason became even more furious.
Why would they make such a lovely girl to go through such a thing? I'm going to go directly to those bosses and have them fired.
Amber looked happy, but I sighed and said, Don't do it. For all I know, Amber must have done something wrong. Why can't you make a reasonable decision when your sister is involved? Then Mason started to get angry at me.
You're just like those seniors. Amber is in pain and suffering, and you're trying to spread her wounds. You are now like Amber's sister. You should be aware of that.
I may have become Amber's sister-in-law, but that doesn't mean I should treat her like a child. If you force me, don't forget that I will consider divorce. I gave him the cold shoulder the whole time. I'm hoping Mason will get mad and say that he would like a divorce. Then one day, my father-in-law decided to go overseas for 6 months due to his work. My mother-in-law, who gets along well with her husband, decided to leave Amber at their house while they were away. There was an idea behind this, that leaving Amber to live alone for 6 months will encourage her to become more independent. It was my father-in-law who initiated the idea. My mother-in-law, who has the same thoughts as Mason, would never have approved of such a plan. Before my in-laws went overseas, my father-in-law contacted me.
Actually, it's about Amber. I've always felt that my wife and Mason have always loved her and spoiled her a little too much. No matter what I said, I couldn't say anything strong enough when the three of them blamed me, as they felt sorry for Amber. But if we don't do something, Amber will be ruined. If Amber can live on her own while we are abroad and pay for utilities, she'll understand that the world is a tough place.
I nodded in agreement with my father-in-law. Yes, Amber has been spending all of her salary on luxuries, buying only luxury brand items, and I think she has no control of her finances. If she has to live on her own or gets married, I think she will be the one who will have a hard time.
I think you're right. I've told Amber to get a job, even if it was a part-time job, and just pay for the utilities. We'll pay the first payment, since the two of us have been using it together, but after that I want to change the payment name to Amber, and have her pay it herself, and be aware of the fact that she is an adult. But I think Amber will turn to Mason if she's in trouble. I would like him to be tough to her if possible, but I don't think Mason can do that. But if you say something harsh to her, I can see Mason getting angry. If you are in any way uncomfortable, you are welcome to go back to your parents' house.
My father-in-law asked me very politely. I thought this might be a good opportunity to repair my relationship with Mason. And if it doesn't work out, I decided to consider divorce. As soon as my in-laws went overseas, Amber came crying to Mason, just as I thought she would. Mason, I can't afford to pay their utilities. Please help me. Mason was astonished and called out to me.
Hey, Sarah, you should pay for her. You're in charge of the family finances.
What? I can't do that. Why should we pay for the 2 household utilities? Besides, your father is trying to get Amber to learn financial skills by having her pay for her living expenses, right? If we help her, it'll be meaningless.
You know what? Amber is cute and she's going to marry a rich guy. Amber doesn't need financial skills. That has always been too hard on Amber. He's the one who's wrong.
I was too dumbfounded to say anything. My values are too different from theirs. I felt like maybe I could understand people from other cultures better than them. We're from the same country and speak the same language, but if we can't reason with each other, It's not worth talking about anything anymore. With this in mind, I stopped saying anything about Amber from then on. Whether Amber came over to Mason's house every day and was spoiled, or whether she gradually brought her belongings into the house and started living in Mason's room, I decided to ignore them and live by myself. In other words, I started doing only my share of the housework. Then Mason started getting angry.
Why don't you do the chores? You're out of your mind. Cute Amber is having a harder time.
No, I'm the one who is having a hard time. You're so busy with Amber that you don't do your share of housework anymore. Amber doesn't even look for a job. She just lounges around all day and asks for an allowance. How old is Amber? She's not a child. She was a working adult until she got fired, right? It's you who is ruining Amber. You're spoiling her so much that you're turning her into a child who can't do anything. I was so angry that I blurted out the truth, what I had been feeling for a while now. But just as I thought, that logic doesn't work with Mason.
Why not? Amber doesn't have to do anything.
Unlike you, she's pretty and sensitive.
Then maybe you should marry Amber.
Talking to Mason is not constructive. I spoke softly to Amber, the source of the problem. Hey, Amber, do you know it's going to be hard for you? I hope you find a husband who is willing to support you as an old jobless woman. Maybe a rich guy, and somebody like Mason? But the reality is, there is no one like that. And you are the one who will have it hard. I agreed with your father. And I want you to be independent. If you want to stay with us, you're going to have to pay for staying here. If you don't want to do that, then you will have to do all the housework. If you don't want to do that, then go back to your parents' place. You have to be able to earn your own money, at least for utilities. And if you want us to help you, we'll help you at least a little. The only person who can say no to this and no to that are children who are in that kind of phase. Don't you understand that you've been troubling me all along? I said with a smile. But Amber started crying and went to hug Mason again. Mason is constantly berating me and preventing Amber from being independent. After that, I decided to live my life, ignoring these siblings. 2 months after my in-laws went overseas, I received a payment slip for water and utility bills. The mailing name was in Amber's name, but the address was ours. I put them on a table and left them there. I even received a notice that the water supply would stop if the payment is not made. My parents-in-law's house is probably without electricity or gas. After a while, the water supply will be shut off too. It's not mine, so whatever. I decided to ignore everything and leave Amber to my in-laws when they come back. I thought this would make my mother-in-law understand what was the problem. After that, I tried to visit my friend's house as much as possible because Mason and I would fight whenever we saw each other. When I talked to the senior staff at work, they supported me and said that they will be there whenever I'll have to get a divorce. They told me that I should make a record of conversations and that I should keep a diary, which I immediately decided to do. And now it's been 6 months since my in-laws went overseas. The day they returned home was a holiday, and Mason and Amber had gone somewhere, so I was home alone for the first time in a while. Just after noon, the doorbell rang at the apartment. It was my mother-in-law with a furious look on her face. I had a bad feeling about this, as I sent her up to her room.
Amber told me that you promised to pay her utilities until she found a job. I can't believe you ignored that and didn't pay at all. When we came home tired after a long trip, I couldn't believe there was no electricity or water.
Are you harassing us? My mother-in-law is just like Mason. I sighed and explained the situation. Amber was staying with us. She was always been very attached to Mason. And even when we were at work, she was always hanging around the house. She doesn't do any housework. She doesn't pay any nursance fees. So why should we have to pay for your utilities? I thought I said the right thing. But of course, my mother-in-law didn't understand.
You know Amber is our princess, right? Why are you being so hard on her? Like her father. She's sensitive and fragile. And we have to protect her.
Is that being a good mother? It means you didn't try to raise your daughter to be a decent adult from the beginning, right? It's Amber who will be in trouble later. If you are a parent, don't you think you should be tough on her now?
What do you know about us?
Just as my mother-in-law and I were arguing, Mason and Amber came home. Now it's 3 against 1. I was able to leave for my parents' house with the bag I had packed earlier when the doorbell rang. I answered the intercom to find my father-in-law standing there. When I let him in, the first thing he did was to scold Amber.
What the hell did you think you were doing? Your mother told me everything. I heard that you had been staying at your brother's and causing trouble for Sarah.
Then it was my mother-in-law who responded,
No, that's not true. Amber couldn't find a job and asked Mason for help. But Sarah gave her a cold shoulder and didn't want to help at all. Mason took pity on Amber and at least let her stay at home. Sarah said she would pay the utilities, but she didn't. The electricity and water were cut off because of Sarah.
I hurried to correct her story.
Oh no, that's completely false. I never said I was going to pay it. Yes, the utility bills did arrive at my house. But I put it on the table in front of the sofa, where Amber always lounges, so that she can easily find it. And I told her to pay it properly. I grabbed my voice recorder and played back the words I had said to Amber a while back. Of course, it included Mason's insane statements. Amber crying to Mason after I had told her this, and Mason berating me. It was my father-in-law who was furious. You guys, I knew you were troubling Sarah. Sarah has been so politely admonishing Amber. And you guys just kept blaming Sarah. I don't understand why you were wrong.
But my mother-in-law, Mason, and Amber don't seem to give a damn about what my father-in-law says to them. My father-in-law must have been annoyed by those 3 for a long time. He would sigh deeply with a sad face. So I made a suggestion. Shall I have someone else listen to this audio and have them tell me what they think of it to get a third-party perspective? If they got upset here, it means that they knew it was their fault while they were putting the blame on me. But my mother-in-law's eyes lit up. That's a great idea. Then let's send it to our relatives and let them make a decision. Mason was nodding his head in agreement, and Amber was also happy about the idea. I was so surprised at their attitude that I wondered if my relatives were thinking the same way as my mother-in-law and Mason. But my father-in-law smiled gently to reassure me, and I relaxed a little. To the end, no matter who I asked, all they had to say was that they blamed my mother-in-law. But still, my mother-in-law refused to give up her opinion. So my father-in-law contacted my mother-in-law's mother. My mother-in-law didn't want this and was avoiding my grandmother-in-law, but my father-in-law insisted. She clearly sounded disappointed as we talked to her over the phone. You've always been too protective of Amber. Haven't I told you many times in the past? Nothing good can come from spoiling a child. I know I was too hard on you. And because of that, you thought you would raise her nicely, but what good is that? If she doesn't turn out to be a decent adult? I'll re-educate her from the ground up, so you can send Amber over to me. My grandmother-in-law finally gave her a stern talking to, and my mother-in-law couldn't seem to resist, so they were to leave Amber at her house for a while. Mason was still not convinced, and I had long since given up on him. I want a divorce after all. What you've done and said may not be grounds for divorce, but they were grounds enough for divorce for me. I don't want you in my life again, I told Mason. Mason started yelling and complaining to me. So I told him that it would be better for both of us if we got a divorce. So we went to the city office together and filed the divorce papers. The parents were very opposed to me getting a divorce. They ambushed me in front of my office and tried to persuade me to reconsider. I told my company about the situation, and they transferred me to a new position. And I started living alone far away from my parents' house. My parents occasionally contacted me, recommending to get back together with Mason. But they were not worried about me. They just don't want people to look at them with a jaundiced eye because they have a divorced single daughter over 30 years old. If they really cared about me, wouldn't they be sympathetic to me after having my life ruined by a sister-spoiling man? Thus, I try to not contact my parents as much as possible and protect my private life. Marriage is not just about you and the person you love. It also involves other in-laws. If so, I want to live freely. If I find someone I want to spend the rest of my life with, I would probably get married again, even if it means I would have to bear the burden of my in-laws. I am now concentrating on my work and leading a more fulfilling life than I did before my divorce.
After my husband's death, my mother-in-law tried kicking me out, but I said I'd leave and sold the house.
If Alex is gone, then this house belongs to me, right?
Huh? What are you talking about at a time like this? Aren't you sad as a mother?
I'm sad, but I need a place to keep living. Anyway, from today, this is my house. You don't have a room anymore.
I was astonished that I didn't even feel like getting angry anymore. Fine, I'll leave then. Saying that, I packed my things and left. My name is Eva. I'm a 29-year-old remote worker. I've been married to Alex for 3 years. We still don't have children, but we continue to live happily like newlyweds. Since I work from home, I used to take care of most things. My husband always enjoys the meals I cook, so it's a blessing. But when I'm busy with my remote work and deadlines, he helps with the housework and supports me. That's how we had a very happy life. By the way, we have a good relationship with Alex's younger brother, John, and his wife. And we often went out for meals together as a group of 4. John and his wife were newlyweds, so they were always in a friendly mood. Well, the same goes for my older brothers, although they sometimes tease us. We have a lot of common topics and enjoy chatting and having fun together because we were around the same age. However, there's one problem that bothers all of us. That is my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is incredibly selfish and arrogant, causing trouble for everyone. As for John and his wife, I felt sorry for them because they had suffered a lot. One day, it was John's birthday, and it seemed that my mother-in-law took John and his wife to a sushi restaurant, promising to treat them to high-quality sushi. My mother-in-law went ahead and ordered whatever she wanted at the restaurant, telling John and his wife, "Go ahead, order whatever you like." They took her words seriously and ended up placing quite a few orders. However, when it came the time to pay the bill, my mother-in-law exclaimed, "Oops, I forgot my wallet." And it seemed that in the end, John and his wife had to pay a substantial amount of money from their own finances. John, who wasn't satisfied with being forced to pay despite it being called a gift, apparently approached my mother-in-law later to remind her about it. However, she simply remarked, "It's nice that we got to go to such an upscale restaurant," and didn't contribute any money at all. By the way, there was a similar incident that almost happened to us on my husband's birthday. At the time, we had already heard about it from John and his wife, so we decided to invite my father-in-law to join us. Instead of going to an upscale sushi restaurant, we opted for a regular sushi place and enjoyed a more modest and down-to-earth dining experience. I remember how my mother-in-law, with a dissatisfied expression on her face, reluctantly ate the sushi, and she couldn't indulge herself since my father-in-law was present. Well, When it comes to birthdays, it's only natural for my father-in-law to offer to cover the expenses. In a way, it's a matter of pride for him. But for my mother-in-law, it's an additional expense from their joint income. At that time, we're spared from paying, but since then, my mother-in-law has become excessively critical towards me. Moreover, she knows that I work from home, so she has visited me several times without prior notice. At first, I tried to handle the situation, but eventually, I realized it was becoming unbearable, so I started pretending not to be home. Fortunately, the place where my husband and I live is an apartment with a video intercom system, so we can see the person's face. If my mother-in-law comes, I can simply ignore her. Once my mother-in-law realized that I was intentionally ignoring only her, she began covering the intercom camera with her hand, creating a black screen, and pretending to be someone else saying, "It's a post office," in an attempt to enter our place. However, it's not common for people to cover the screen, so I was convinced that it was my mother-in-law and continued to ignore her. After that, it seems like she gave up, and she rarely visited our home. Well, that's how my mother-in-law has been behaving arrogantly and causing trouble for us. And recently, I heard that my in-laws are facing the risk of divorce. So, whenever we gather, that topic inevitably comes up at least once. I don't understand why they won't tell us why they are on the verge of divorce. Well, I think it's more like Dad got fed up with Mom. It seems that both Alex and John have witnessed their mother's negative character traits, or rather, her selfishness, since they were children. That's why they had a strong belief that she would definitely engaging in bullying me and John's wife. So, they made a conscious effort to avoid visiting their parents' home unless it was absolutely necessary in order to prevent any harm coming to themselves or us. However, with her impending divorce and the fact that she'll be left alone, there would be no one to put a stop to her unruly behavior. I had a feeling that she might try to visit our home multiple times like before, or even go to John's place. And as I suspected, my uneasy premonition turned out to be true. It seems that my mother-in-law immediately sought refuge with John and his wife after the divorce was announced. She repeatedly kneeled down and pleaded, saying, "I've changed my ways, so please let me stay here until I find a new place." Both John and his wife were generally calm and good-natured people, so my mother-in-law's desperate plea seemed to rattle their hearts a bit. They ended up allowing her to stay temporarily as long as she found a new place soon. However, as expected, this turned out to be a huge mistake. The quiet facade my mother-in-law initially showed quickly faded, and she returned to her usual self. As a result, my sister-in-law began to suffer from severe mistreatment. She came to me in tears, and I instructed her to gather evidence of the mistreatment using a voice recorder. And once the evidence was collected, we planned to confront my mother-in-law with it and collectively drive her out. "Oh, is that you, Alex?" "Oh, and Eva?" She said her names in tone that clearly showed her lowered spirits. "What's happening with both of you today?" "John and his wife were having difficulties, so they came to Eva's house." "What kind of difficulties?" The mother-in-law seemed unaware of the situation, but forced herself to sit down. "Well then, let's get straight to the point. Mom, could you please stop causing more trouble for John?" "What? What are you suddenly talking about?" "That I'm causing trouble for John and his wife?" "What kind of baseless accusation is this?" "Don't mess around. You've been harassing my wife during the day." "What? I haven't done anything like that." "Are you being deceived by this woman?" "You harass me almost every day. I can't bear it anymore." "Exactly. We're told that you, Mom, would change your attitude and stay in the spare room until you find a place. But even after a week, you refuse to leave and continue to harass my wife. What's going on? This is unacceptable."
I'm telling you, I haven't been harassing your wife. It's a misunderstanding. If you insist, can you show me some evidence?
Understood.
Huh?
John's wife plays the recorder, capturing my mother-in-law's voice berating her. The recording contains numerous instances of my mother-in-law verbally mistreating John's wife.
Mom, even with this, you still claim you haven't been mistreating my wife? Well, this is, you must be imitating me in a cowardly way.
My defiant mother-in-law tries to launch at John's wife, but John blocked her.
Enough is enough. Taking advantage of people's kindness and doing as you please. We're cutting ties with you, Mom. Pack your things and leave right now. What? Then where am I supposed to go?
Well, how about we go to a real estate agency now? Let's find a place for you to move in immediately.
We'll gather your belongings and arrange for you to stay at a hotel. Wait a minute. Are you serious about this? Of course we are. That's why we came here in the first place.
Then, with John and his wife, we got rid of my mother-in-law's belongings. We quickly sold any items that seemed valuable among the unnecessary things and used the money to fund my mother-in-law's relocation. My mother-in-law was in a state of panic, as the four of us took decisive action to evict her without any further discussion. Unluckily, we found an apartment with immediate availability and affordable rent. My husband immediately had my mother-in-law sign the contract and decide on the move. Afterwards, we had her stay at a cheap hotel, and our role was complete. We received heartfelt gratitude from John and his wife once everything was settled. We celebrated the successful eviction of my mother-in-law. But we were soon defeated by her new ways of causing trouble for me and my husband. It happened one day when I returned to the apartment after grocery shopping. As I approached the entrance of the apartment building and tried to use the keycard, I noticed someone collapse there.
Oh no, are you okay?
Hastily rushing over and checking if the person was conscious, she then lifted her face.
Mother?
To my surprise, it was my mother-in-law.
Eva, help me.
Wait, should I call an ambulance?
Water.
Water? It seemed that my mother-in-law hadn't eaten or drunk anything for quite some time. This area was the entrance of the apartment building, and during the day, many residents were coming and going. Some people looked worried and others frowned, mistaking her for a drunk. Unable to leave her there, I offered her my help and brought her inside the house.
So, she just ate her full and fell asleep, huh?
I'm sorry, but leaving her there would have caused trouble for the other residents.
No, it's not your fault, Eva. I can't believe I ended up with such an outrageous mother. I'm leaving for a business trip overseas the day after tomorrow. I hope everything will be fine.
That is a concern, but... Well, your mother has her own apartment, so I think she'll be okay once she gets back there. At that time, I underestimated the situation. And then, my husband went on his business trip, and the seasons came and went. This time, he was scheduled to be away for 6 months on a business trip to Antarctica. It was a bit lonely, but it was his job, so there was nothing I could do.
Well, I'm off.
Yeah, take care of yourself.
Oh, take care. Yeah.
For some reason, my mother-in-law accompanied us to the airport. She said she wanted to see him off. On the way back in the car, I decided to drop my mother-in-law at her own place. Then, my mother-in-law said something unbelievable.
So, I've been kicked out of that house.
Huh?
Why?
Well, I couldn't pay the rent. Didn't you receive money from the property division?
Well, I wanted to use that for installment payments for the alimony.
Huh? It turned out that my mother-in-law got divorced from my father-in-law due to her affair.
Eva, please, I have nowhere to go.
Well, if that's the case, why don't you go to your affair partner's place?
It's impossible. He said he wouldn't break up because his wife didn't want a divorce.
So, it was an affair between married individuals.
Please, Eva. If I stay like this, I might starve to death. Just like the day before yesterday. I promise I won't cause any trouble.
I understand. I reluctantly decided to let her stay at her house. I didn't want to cause trouble like last time, making a scene in front of the apartment and disturbing other people. After that, my mother-in-law, while being a nuisance, at least behaved quietly as longer. It seemed that the stern warning my husband gave her via video call from his overseas assignment had an effect. Since my husband declared that he would kick her out if anything happened, my mother-in-law seemed to have realized that if she caused trouble again, she would end up homeless. However, in the midst of it all, an unexpected event occurred. My husband went missing. Neither his company nor the local people had any substantial information. There was no guarantee that he was still alive. I was deeply saddened by this. In just 2 more months, he was scheduled to return home. But since then, no matter how many months passed, I couldn't find any trace of my husband. His life was likely not spared. People with such and such views began to appear here and there. I hope he's safe. While thinking that way, somewhere deep in my heart, I also started to feel that it might be hopeless. And at that moment, my mother-in-law started to say something outrageous.
If Alex is gone, then this house belongs to me, right?
Huh? Why are you saying such things at a time like this? We still don't know if he's really gone or not. Aren't you sad as a mother?
Of course I'm sad. But to survive, I need a place to live. We have to accept reality and move forward. Anyway, from today on, this is my house. You don't have a room here anymore.
I was shocked and didn't even feel like getting angry anymore. Fine, then I'll leave. Saying that, I packed my things and left. Afterwards, my sympathetic brother-in-law and his wife heard about the situation and invited me to stay at their place for a while. Then I looked for a room to stay in and found a nice place to stay and got ready to move there. Then my mother-in-law stormed into John and his wife's house.
Eva, you're here, right?
My brother-in-law and his wife tried to send her away, but I said, I'll handle this, and went to the entrance. Please, don't cause any more trouble in the neighborhood.
Wait, Eva? I was kicked out of the house. What's going on?
Oh, come to think of it, it's been a month already. When I left the house, I sold it, and the eviction order was issued to your place.
Huh? But the house belongs to Alex, right?
The house is under my name. I was the one who contracted it while working from home, instead of going on frequent business trips.
What should I do if I'm kicked out of the house?
I don't know. Find a job and rent a room for yourself. At that moment, my brother-in-law and his wife also arrived.
If you ever come to our house again, I won't hesitate to report you. No way.
My mother-in-law ran away from the scene crying. Well, finally she's disappeared from our sight, I thought to myself. Afterward, I moved into a room for living alone. The room was comfortable, but I guess it's too big for one person. There's no partner who could appreciate and enjoy the meals I cook, I thought. Will I never see that face again? Let's eat. The words I spoke alone vanished into thin air without reaching anyone else's ear. Suddenly, the intercom rang. On a screen, it was either covered or completely black. Could it be my mother-in-law? How did she find out where I am? She's really persistent. What is it now, Mom? If you don't stop, I'll call the police. But the voice that came from the screen was not my mother-in-law.
Oh, calling the police would be a problem. I'm currently in the country illegally, you know.
Huh? I recognized that voice. And then, The hand that was covering the screen moved away, revealing a clear view of the face. Alex!
I'm home.
When I unlocked the door and opened the entrance, unmistakably, my husband was there. Alex! You're alive! I'm so relieved. Tears kept flowing from my eyes.
I'm sorry for being late.
I was really worried. I even started to think you might have passed away. I ended up considering such things. My husband hugged me and apologized, saying I'm really sorry. He explained that the ship he was on exploded, and all his belongings, including his passport and smartphone, were lost. After that, he went through a life or death struggle while being stranded, he said. But fortunately, he met kind people who let him into their home and managed to survive, he added. He had been sending letters, but apparently, my mother-in-law had been unknowingly stowing them away. They never reached my eyes. And now, after trying various means, it seems that he will be able to return to America.
I was surprised when I got home and found someone else living there. So I went to my brother's house and he told me to visit here.
I see. But I'm just glad you're alive. Afterwards, my husband changed jobs to one that doesn't involve overseas business trips. It was a decision made with the intention of never experiencing something like that again. Going through that incident made our relationship as a couple even stronger than before. And finally, we were blessed with a child. Both my husband and I were overjoyed. My brother-in-law and his wife also rushed to celebrate with us. By the way, I have no idea how my mother-in-law is doing now, but she's probably living a quite impoverished life. I haven't shared my current address with her, and my brother-in-law's family also moved cautiously. As a result, my mother-in-law has no way of knowing our whereabouts. We have found our peace and tranquility in our daily lives. I will continue to love my husband for the rest of my life. As a married couple, we want to cherish and raise our upcoming child with care.
Betrayed by my husband after years of supporting his family's farm, the one who rescued me when I was abandoned.
I am Karen, a 42-year-old working housewife. My husband Archie runs the family farm with my in-laws. Our family consists of my husband, 2 teenage daughters, and my in-laws, making it a family of 6. I'm also involved working in the fields from early morning, assisting with vegetable sorting and shipping until evening. I handle most of the household chores as well. Despite our efforts, my husband doesn't receive a substantial income. And honestly, life is not easy. Living in the countryside, our house is large, and my in-laws often reminds us how lucky we are to live in such a ground house for free. But there's nothing good about the house being so big, except for the fact that it's difficult to clean. Moreover, my husband frequently goes out drinking with his friends on weekends, even though farmers typically doesn't have weekends off. As a result, whenever he is knocked out with a hangover, I am left with no choice but to take over his work. With his meager salary being spent on alcohol, I consistently express my dissatisfaction to my husband, which inevitably leads to fights. I often wonder why I ended up marrying into such a family, while looking at my husband snoring. However, the reason I didn't get a divorce is that I had nowhere else to go. My parents passed away early, and my brother and his wife currently live on our family home. Despite this, I found solace in one small pleasure: cooking with ingredients grown by neighboring farmers. These ingredients are usually unsellable due to their unconventional appearance, but their taste is excellent. So I make dishes and sweets using these ingredients and distribute them to the neighborhood. Everyone appreciates them, which gives me the strength to continue living with my difficult husband and in-laws. I have supported my husband for 20 years, reminding myself that even in the worst circumstances, we can survive here. This has been my daily life for a while, until an unexpected event occurred one day. To my surprise, a television crew came to interview us while we were working in the fields. It seemed to be a program about lunch at a farmer's house. My mother-in-law, thrilled, eagerly accepted the microphone. She then ordered me to prepare lunch and went upstairs to put on some makeup. I wiped the sweat off my bare face and prepared the table while my husband and father-in-law were being interviewed. The TV crew requested an authentic representation, so I set up the table as I usually would. I also added yesterday's homemade orange pound cake to the spread. Soon, my mother-in-law, wearing her favorite dress and bright red lipstick, appeared.
Oh no! This table looks so rustic. It's embarrassing.
Usually, we have a more glamorous setup.
No, not at all. It's an ideal lunch with plenty of vegetables. And some homemade cake? Amazing!
The TV crew members certainly knew how to flatter. It might not have been their true opinion, but it made me happy. After the interview, we all gathered around the table, and the TV crews praised the food as they devoured everything. My mother-in-law, in her usual fashion, gave nonsensical explanations about the dishes. It was almost embarrassing to watch my mother-in-law trying to look that good. After all the filming was over, the TV crew started getting ready to leave. At any rate, I'm glad it all ended without incident.
It was great. Thank you, ma'am.
As the staff members were leaving, they approached me and offered words of gratitude. Apparently, they knew from the start that it was me who prepared the food. Of course, I was happy that they ate all the food, but I was also very happy that they noticed my efforts. It warmed my heart for the first time in a long time. Half a month after the interview, the show was broadcasted on TV. Relatives and neighbors were ecstatic, and our phone kept ringing throughout the day. What was interesting was that most of the scenes with the husband and in-laws were cut, and the focus was on the vegetables themselves and the food. Even so, they were snickering for a while at the fact that they had appeared on TV. However, after 3 months after the TV appearance, my husband dropped a bombshell.
I've fallen in love with someone else. So, please divorce me.
Huh? I was taken aback by the unexpected confession, my mind going blank. Ignoring my speechlessness, my husband continued to talk.
There's a girl who approached me at the bar. She happened to see me on TV, you know?
So, you're saying you're cheating on me? I asked with a trembling voice, and my husband sighed.
No, it's not like that. I mean, not yet.
What do you mean?
When I offered to date her, she said she couldn't be with a married man. I mean, isn't she great or what? So I want to respond to her feelings. I think it's fate.
Don't you know how selfish you are? This is crazy. I was about to explode with my husband's stupid words. Then suddenly, my mother-in-law appeared and spoke up.
Just get a divorce already.
What?
I've always thought that a woman like you doesn't suit Archie. Jealousy is ugly, you know? Give up.
What? Jealousy?
Plus, you're someone who can't even bear a son. It's obvious that Archie deserves a younger, obedient wife who can still have children.
That's right. My father-in-law, who appeared before I knew it, was grinning and nodding behind her. In utter shock, I faced my husband, who continued.
You can even take the kids with you if you want.
What?
I want to start with a clean slate with her.
You! How dare you!
I'll transfer the child support payments until they finish junior high. Even if they go to high school or college anyway, they'll soon be married off, so even tuition will be wasted, right?
My husband arrogantly proposed the worst thing possible. Nausea overwhelmed me, and I fled from the house as if escaping. He could discard his blood-related daughter so easily. It's sickening, sad, and empty. What were the past 20 years of my life? But first, how do I explain this crazy situation to my daughters? No matter how I do it, I'm sure it will hurt my daughters. Above all, how will the three of us, my daughters and I, live from now on? Dizzy from the despairing situation, I involuntarily curled up in despair. "Mom!" my daughter shouted as they appeared. Oh no. Did they already hear about the divorce? "I'm sorry, girls. Maybe it's all my fault," I replied in a voice that sounded as if it were squeezed out on me. Then my younger daughter, with tears in her eyes, said, "Mom, no, it's not your fault. We don't need such a family. I don't care. Let's leave." My oldest daughter continued, rubbing my back. "Me too. It's disgusting how Dad is excited about a younger girl. Grandma is the worst. She's been mistreating you for a long time. They don't deserve us. Let's just leave. Just the three of us." Tears welled up as I felt the support from my daughters. I felt a sense of pride knowing that they had both grown up to be kind and resilient individuals. Yes, I must protect them at any cost. That's what I need to do as their mother. I slapped my own cheek, holding back the tears. Immediately after deciding to divorce, I contacted my older brother and his wife. They scolded me in tears, saying they wish I had consulted with them earlier. The next morning, as I packed our belongings with the children, there was commotion outside in the yard. Curious, I peeked out from the veranda and saw a young woman arguing with my husband and mother-in-law. Could that be the future bride? Just as I was thinking that, the young woman turned towards me with a demonic expression and headed my way. I instinctively took a step back, caught off guard by the force of her momentum. "Is that true that you're divorcing him?" "I don't know what he told you, but I don't like that man at all." "Oh, hey, what?" I was surprised by the sudden accusation from the person I thought was my husband's affair partner. My husband and mother-in-law hurriedly approached. "Hey, Emma, what are you saying? Don't you remember when you said that I was cool?" "I never said that. I said I was a big fan of your wife, not you. I said that so many times, didn't I?" I was momentarily taken aback by the unexpected confession. Then she turned to me and started to explain. "Actually, my family also runs a farm, and I help out there too. So I really admire how you can cook such a diverse range of dishes with the vegetables you've grown. I genuinely respect you, ma'am." "Oh, that dishes? I prepared it, you know." My mother-in-law shamelessly throws in a lie. Then Emma glared at her. "Yeah? The old lady sitting at a dining table with a face full of makeup after working in the fields." I couldn't help but burst into laughter at Emma's brutally honest remark. "It just so happened that I saw your husband at the nearby table when I was out drinking with friends. So I approached him, mentioning that I'm involved in farming and that I'm a big fan of his wife. But then, yesterday, I suddenly received a message saying I've separated from my wife. I freaked out." "Oh, so that's what it is." "In other words, she's also a victim. My husband's eyes dart around. His mouth slightly agape. I'm sorry it turned into such a situation. We have to come all the way here. No, I'm the one who should apologize. It's a bit awkward. It's okay, really. I actually wanted to separate from him anyway. Huh? It's become a good opportunity. Thank you. My husband's face is filled with surprise. To be honest, I think it's better too. He's such a loser. And speaking of which, don't you ever contact me again. Well done.
Wait a minute, Emma.
Then, my eldest daughter, who had come to the scene, glared at my husband and said, Pathetic. The next day, ignoring my husband and in-laws, we left the house. After staying with my brother and his wife for a while, we rented a small house. The divorce proceedings were also finalized. The lawyer recommended by my brother and his wife was excellent. They not only helped with the university tuition for my daughters, but also filed for compensation for the verbal abuse and malicious behavior toward me. And then, 5 years later, I'm running a food truck at a local farmer's market in the countryside. The dishes I create using mainly vegetables are well received by the elderly and even by vegetable-hating children. Recently, I've been getting more media coverage, and there are even customers who come all the way from the city just to eat my food. My daughters, who have safely become college and high school students, help me at the truck on Sundays. I was living busy yet fulfilling days like that, when one day, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law suddenly appeared at my shop.
Looks like business is good. I saw it on TV. My daughter has become famous, and we are proud of it.
What nonsense are they spouting out on a weekday afternoon? Huh? Daughter? What kind of joke is this? If you're not buying anything, please, leave.
I came to pick you up today.
Huh?
Your tired face on the TV screen. I knew it right away. You're asking me for help, right? If you love cooking so much, why don't you open a cafe in our house?
Both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law continue to spew convenient delusions. Years have passed, but these people haven't changed at all. Before I could respond, an employee popped her head out from the backyard. Huh? Here we go again. Delusional idiot.
What the hell?
My ex-husband, who was about to glare at the person who insulted him, froze in shock.
Emma? Why are you here?
Wearing the same apron as me. It's none other than Emma. Why? Because her father is my employer. They are even more stunned by this unexpected turn of events. Emma and I exchange glances and smirk. The thing is, after our divorce, I ran into Emma at the local supermarket. Laughing at the coincidence, we soon became close friends. In the meantime, Emma's parents hired me. We frequently visited each other's homes and had home parties. Every time, my cooking received high praise from everyone. And 3 years ago, I decided to start my own food truck. Now I have expanded the business with franchises in other states. I even started online sales, and the business is flourishing. Thanks to the bountiful goddess you guys let go, my family is secure.
Oh no, Emma.
You are the goddess of good fortune to me. My ex-husband was even more dumbfounded, looking at the two of us giggling and frolicking. Now is the chance to strike. By the way, Archie, I heard you fell victim to a marriage scam. Did you get your money back?
Why would you?
My ex-husband's face turns pale. his eyes darting around. You thought you could deceive me, thinking I knew nothing and wanted to reconcile. But too bad for you, I still have good relationships with the neighbors. When I asked them to deliver ingredients to my shop, they gladly agreed. They also tell me all about you, lots of things. And with a smile on my face, I tell them the one thing I want them to know the most. Oh, by the way, I'm remarried now.
What? That's a lie, right?
The subsequent lives of my ex-husband and in-laws were miserable. They couldn't repay their debts despite selling off everything, and now they were living and working on a remote farm. They were left with no option but to work tirelessly until their last breath. By the way, my new husband is the producer at that television station. Back then, he said it was delicious and gave me his business card as he left. Apparently, there was quite a response to my cooking, and there were even discussions about a sequel. But since we ended up divorcing, the plan fell through. However, it's now being broadcast with my current food truck. Thanks to my husband's show, my food truck's popularity skyrocketed, and the business became stable. If you live earnestly and honestly, there are people who recognize your actions. Life is not as bad as you might think. Hello, what would you like today? I continue to imagine the smiles that awaits at the end of my cooking, living in this place.
My husband convinces me so that he can live in a condo, lets my mother-in-law come over frequently, and cheats on me.
What are you staring at? You're a stranger now.
I turned around and there was my mother-in-law with a smirk on her face. She looked at me as if she were looking at trash. I had a lot on my mind, but I tried to keep my composure and sat back. Yes, I know. But this house?
What? After all this time? It's no use apologizing. Get out of my son's house as fast as you can.
I understand. The movers will be here shortly.
Oh, well, can you make it quicker?
She must be quite happy to live alone and doting on her son. Her own son lives in a condo. Now all that is left is for me to get divorced and for me to leave, and all will be well for her. She must be thinking like that. But I'm sorry to hear that. Do you think you can get what you want after mocking people so much? I won't let that happen. I'm going to push you to the limit. My name is Cecile. I am 29 years old. I got married 2 years ago, and now I work for a company. I met my husband Douglas 4 years ago. He was working at a factory that was a subcontractor of our company. We first met at a business meeting. I was one in charge of the meeting, and I went to the factory, but he was also the liaison. In between meetings, we began to do small talk and naturally grew closer. We became attracted to each other, and eventually he asked me to go out with him. After 2 years of dating, we successfully made it to the finish line. My family and colleagues congratulated me, but my good friends were a little concerned. The reason was that my husband's income was lower than mine. My company is a fairly large one, and even I, as a woman, earn nearly twice as much as my age. In contrast, my husband, who is the same age as me, earns less than half my income. Why would you marry someone who earns more than half as much as you do? I was asked many times by good friends, but I didn't care about money. I have never had much of an appetite for material things, and I buy only the bare minimum of clothing. I have plenty of money saved up, and if I had to spend it on someone I liked, I wouldn't begrudge it. That's what I thought. Because of this personality, I didn't mind marrying Douglas. But I didn't realize at the time that my marriage to Douglas was going to be a huge mistake for me. After about a year of marriage, we moved to a condo. The reason was that my husband started saying that he wanted to live there at least once in his life. I was against it at first because it came out of the blue. But once he starts talking, he never backs down. On this particular day, he started talking to me again. Let's move to a condo. You're talking about that again. I'd rather save up and buy my own home than move to a place like that. In this day and age, owning your own home is nothing but a disadvantage. It costs a lot of money for the land, and it takes a lot of time and effort to maintain. On the other hand, with a condominium, the management company takes care of everything. That's true, but... Right? And their security is the best. I'm just worrying about you. You worry about me? I still don't know if my husband really thought so at the time. It may have been just a stopgap lie to get us to move to a condo. Still, I felt that he was thinking about me that much. I was so pleased with my husband's love that I listened to his request. We decided to move to a condo. Naturally, all the initial and moving costs were waiting for me. I was also the owner of the condominium, but he and I accepted it as a matter of course. However, right after we moved in, I began to feel uncomfortable. It was because my mother-in-law started to stay at the condo on a regular basis. Of course, it was my husband who invited her, but even so, it was too frequent. At first, it was once a week, then 2 days a week, then 4 days a week, and the frequency of visits gradually increased. Today, when I came home again, I found my mother-in-law in the living room. I was stunned, but she smiled and started talking. Oh my God, Cecile, welcome home. What are you doing in our house, Joanna? Oh, you didn't hear? Douglas gave me a duplicate key the other day. He said I could come over whenever I wanted. That's why I came early today. I didn't know that. And I didn't know that you would just show up without any notice. That's fine. We're a family. I don't need to call you every time I go to my son's house. Oh no. I was at a loss for further words because of the difference from my common sense. In contrast to my standing still, my mother-in-law started humming and rummaging through the refrigerator. Finally, she took out the cream puffs I had bought. I'm hungry, so I'll have some. And started eating them without permission. I couldn't believe it. Did my mother-in-law really have such a lack of common sense? No matter how much she's my mother-in-law, doesn't she usually not have this much discretion? I was surprised that my own common sense and that of others were so different. The reason why I couldn't speak out strongly was because she was my husband's mother. I had a lot of things I wanted to say, but I could not say them to my mother-in-law. So one evening, I decided to talk to my husband about it. Hey Douglas, about your mother. Could she come a little less often? My husband frowned and said in a pained tone, Oh, why are you unhappy with my mother's visits? I mean, it's fine for her to come to our house. It's just that she comes too often. Besides, why did you have to give your mother a duplicate key? It's just that when I come home from work and she is there, I'm surprised and I don't feel at ease. She's family too. She cares about us. So don't talk like that. That's not what I'm talking about. Anyway, I'll let her do whatever she wants. You're just my wife, so don't be too bossy with my mother. My husband, who was so kind to me when we were dating, and at the beginning of our marriage, seemed to have changed recently. Especially when it comes to my mother-in-law, he relentlessly stands up to her and blames me. My husband puts my mother-in-law before me. This was the moment when I became aware of the discomfort I had been pretending not to notice. After I told my husband about this, he started coming home late. He had rarely worked overtime in the past, but now he comes home in the morning several times a week. The fact that my husband comes home late inevitably means that he spends more time with his mother-in-law. Although they don't live together, my mother-in-law had started to stay over without a care in the world. Each time, she complained about my housework. These side dishes are not well seasoned. A wife should take care of the house, not a job. That's why Douglas doesn't come home anymore. The list goes on and on. All of these are unreasonable arguments. Every time she complains, my heart's gradually worn away. My husband doesn't come home very often, and when I try to talk to him, he gives me a disapproving look. I have been unable to tell him what was going on. Then one day, on a holiday, my husband had gone out in the morning. My mother-in-law also did not come today. I started to clean the house to enjoy my time alone for the first time in a while. I vacuumed the living room and hallway, and finally went to my husband's room. As I was mopping under the bed, I suddenly saw a receipt. What? What is this? The receipt was for a place used by men and women to engage in dubious activities. I checked the date and found that it coincided with the day he had to come home in the morning because he had to work overtime. Convinced that my husband was cheating on me, I immediately searched through the closet. I found a small paper bag in the bag. It contained a list of restaurants he might have gone to with his cheating partner. There was also a large number of receipts for brand names items that he had bought for her. Douglas had recently asked me to reduce our living expenses in the name of saving money for our newborn child. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I realize that it was probably a lie to pay for the affair partner. The next day, I went to a detective agency that I had researched beforehand and asked them to investigate my husband's affair. I acted normal at home so that my husband and mother-in-law would not know. 2 weeks later, I went to the detective agency to get a report. My husband was having an affair with the daughter of the factory president. With the evidence in hand, I decided to wait for my husband to come home that night. He came home after midnight as usual, and I immediately started talking to him. Douglas, you were cheating on me, weren't you? My husband had his back to me, but the moment he heard those words, his shoulders jolted. He slowly turned around and began to make excuses with a limp smile. What are you talking about? I would never cheat on you. I already have proof. You can't get away with it. No. It's not like I'm playing around with her. I don't care if it's for fun or not. You can't have that kind of relationship with her. And it's true that you lied to me. Well, that's... Anyway, I can't do it anymore. I've decided to get a divorce. I took out my completed divorce papers and held them out in front of my husband. His eyes widened for a moment. Then he clicked his tongue and began to feel them out roughly. The next day, I went to the office to get Douglas out of the house. I called the movers to have Douglas removed from the house for the next holiday. I didn't tell him about it, but he has a family home, so he would have no trouble finding a place to go. I will just cancel the lease there, as next month is the new renewal month for this condo. I had decided to move to another apartment near the office. 1 week later, on this day, the movers were supposed to come this afternoon. Douglas was off work, and I've been home since the morning. He proudly called his cheating partner. I've already hired a lawyer and have already filed a claim for compensation against Douglas and the cheating partner. I will soon receive a certified letter, and when that happens, the factory where he works will find out. The affair will be exposed to the president of the company as well. However, Douglas may be relaxed now that the divorce has already been finalized. He is having a nice phone conversation with his partner. While I was doing housework with him in the background, the intercom rang. I opened the front door to find my mother-in-law standing there. She was carrying a large carry-on case, and she was walking into the house. I don't know why she was carrying such a large baggage, but she must have come to stay without permission as usual. While I was doing my chores without paying attention to her, she called out to me from behind. Why are you still here? You are an outsider now, aren't you? I turned around to see my mother-in-law smiling wickedly at me. She looked at me as if she were looking at trash. I had a lot on my mind, but I just kept my composure and sat back. Yes, I suppose so. But this house?
What? It's no use apologizing now. Get out my son's condo as fast as you can.
Huh? Didn't you hear me? I said get out. You're divorced, aren't you?
Then there's no reason for you to be here.
From today,
I'm going to live here.
At that moment, I felt my sympathy for them disappeared. I found myself lowering my voice and saying in return,
Okay, I understand. The movers will be here in a few minutes.
Oh, well, can you make it quick?
Even just for a second.
I guess she is quite happy to live alone with her son. After all, her own son lives in a condo. All that is left is for me to get divorced and for me to leave, and all will be well for her.
She must be thinking like that.
But that's unfortunate.
Do you think you can get what you want after mocking people so much?
I won't let that happen. I'm going to drive you to the brink. And there you are. The movers arrived just in time. I unlocked the entrance and invited them in. Please take care of everything in that room. Oh, and please leave the living room as it is. I gave the order, and the contractors entered Douglas's room and immediately began working.
Hey, what's going on? What do you mean? You're the one who's leaving. So why don't you just move your stuff out?
Apparently, Douglas really thought he could continue to live in the house after the divorce. This place was originally contracted in my name, and I had paid the rent. Anyone who thinks about it knows that he won't be able to live here if he gets divorced. And his mother, she also really thought that she and her son would be able to live in the house after I left. This is why she came all the way here today with her large luggage.
What do you mean?
I said coldly to my mother-in-law who was yelling at me. What's the meaning of all this? Do you know why I divorced him in the first place? It was because he cheated on me.
So what? You are a narrow-minded woman who can't forgive a man's cheating or two. Don't you dare sit on your hands like that.
What did you say? Perhaps you don't know that this room is rented in my name and that I have been paying all the rent.
What do you mean? I thought Douglas was renting this condo.
My mother-in-law looked at my ex-husband, but he quickly looked away. He was probably lying to make himself look good. Meanwhile, more and more of Douglas's stuff was being moved out.
Hey, where are you taking my stuff?
He was panicking, so I said to him, Where's it going to? Your parents' house. It's good that you have a place to go. Well, I don't know what your strict father will say.
Wait a minute. If my dad finds out about this, I beg you, please, forget me. I'll do anything.
If you'll do anything, then get out of my sight right now. I'll never forgive you and your mother. You are a distraction to my life. You're disgusting. Get out of my life.
We've been together this whole time. We trusted each other as husband and wife.
Who is the one who broke that trust? You live in a condo you want. You let your mother do whatever she wants. And you betrayed me behind my back. How's that? Satisfied? I bet you must have been very vain to be able to live in a tower block with your wife's money.
Cecile, don't say that. Let's talk about it. Let's talk.
No. Get your mother and get out of here. I'm not the one who's living in this room. You are. I guess they were surprised by my anger, which I had never shown before. Douglas and my mother-in-law grabbed their belongings and ran away. Then, they went back to their hometown. At first, they kept the divorce from my father-in-law. However, he found out everything by the certified letter from the lawyer's office. My father-in-law was furious and kicked Douglas out of the house, disinheriting him. My father-in-law called me to ask about the situation, so I told him about it. He told me that he had finally decided to divorce my mother-in-law. They were kicked out of their house and moved into a one-room apartment. However, When the president of the company he worked for found out about the affair, Douglas was fired immediately. Douglas was also cut off from the daughter of the company president with whom he was having an affair. He lost his job and had nothing left. Now, he and his mother are working part-time to make ends meet. He got what he deserved. Suck on that. As for me, I have moved to an apartment near my office. I'm living a peaceful life. I am now able to save a lot of money for rent and living expenses. Now that I'm single again, I'm thinking of going on a trip by myself again. I think about it as I look at the travel brochure I saw. From now on, it would not be a bad idea to try to live for myself. I was finally able to think this way.